Uh, Hello everyone. Good evening. Good evening. I am architect Himanshu Taneja, and I would be hosting today's session 10 of One-on-One Gupshup online series, organized by Isola Gujarat and Isola Rajasthan chapter. And uh, so I welcome you all. We have a good audience here and good number of audience here. I welcome you all to this online forum. And so we are honored to have architect K. Venkatesh Kumar here from Bangalore, who would be presenting about broader perspective of landscape profession. And uh, he's an urbanist with around 21 years of professional experience in the field of regional planning, urban planning, master planning, urban design, landscaping, infrastructure planning, and infrastructure project development under PPP model. He has done his graduation in architecture from NIT Trichy and post graduation from SEPT University in landscape architecture. He has also done MBA in finance from ICFI University. He was associated with many esteemed firms like Oikos, CZBA, and many corporates like Jurong, ILNFS, IDC, EGIS, and currently associated with IDEC Bangalore as Senior Vice President and Head of Urban Planning and Design Division. He has done many prestigious projects and many flagship projects like Regional Perspective Plan for Bangalore, Mumbai Economic Corridor, BMEC for BMISEDC, Regional Plan Feasibility Study for South India Industrial and Infrastructure Development Corridor, Chennai Bangalore Industrial Corridor for JETRO, preparation and implementation of Thimpu structure plan, urban design proposal and local area planning for capital of Bhutan, strategic plan for Pakyong, Sikkim, revised structural plan 2031 for Bangalore metropolitan region for BMRDA, and many other flagship projects. Apart from this, he has worked on many planning, design, and implementation of more than 40 master planning and urban design projects across various sectors of tourism, conservation, pilgrimage destinations, IT parks, industrial master plan, townships, etc. Apart from this, he's also academically associated as advisor for few architectural institutes in Tamil Nadu. So I welcome you, uh, Mr. Venkatesh. Before going ahead, I would like everyone to please mute your mic and audios and to off your videos to have better quality of the presentation. And we would be having a question answer session in the end. So I would request you all to write your questions after the presentation whenever it is asked for. So let's enjoy and gain the fullest. Sir, please share your presentation.
Thank you, Himanshu, for the introduction. First of all, I should thank Isola Gujarat and Rajasthan for giving me this opportunity to present in this forum. I really appreciate the efforts made by the Isola Gujarat and Rajasthan team. In the season of raining webinars, I think the webinars of Isola is going very consistently and well appreciated. With that, I'll start with my presentation. Able to see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You have to start the slide. So yes, now it's visible.
Yeah. So as Himanshu introduced, good evening everybody. First of all, as Himanshu introduced, today's my presentation will be on broader perspective of landscape profession, basically taking you through various other disciplines apart from landscape design. So regional planning, urban planning, environmental conservation, urban design, heritage conservation, sustainable development, area development, landscape design. So these are the, basically this particular slide is talk about various disciplines where landscape architect or our profession can, as profession, we can contribute or get involved. But mostly if you see, mostly we are involved in landscape design. To some extent, yes, sustainable development and master plans. And probably say 2 or 1 out of 10 projects we get involved in urban design, environmental conservation plan kind of project. But regional planning, urban planning, heritage conservation, very, very rarely, mostly we don't get opportunities, nor we ourselves push towards getting into these kind of project. About today's presentation in myself, I'm going to illustrate you through the need for our involvement in regional planning, urban planning, and of course urban design and other segments apart from landscape design, which we predominantly are definitely contributing towards. So I will start from regional plan and come to master plan, a larger scale project to a smaller scale. Today, I'm not going into details of the project. Basically, I will be getting into key value addition and the process we followed in these projects. To start with, I will start presenting Bangalore-Mumbai Economical Corridor. It is covering 2 states. Basically, the objective of this particular project, it is part of a series of corridor projects which Government of India is planning across our country. So first corridor, everybody must know, in the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. So this is parallelly, the second corridor was Bangalore, Chennai-Bangalore, and this is the third corridor, I would say. And of course, Amritsar, Kolkata, and Vizag, Kanyakumari, Vizag, Chennai. These are the other corridors which are getting planned. So in 2014, I was with Aegis at that time. So we got this project of doing a perspective plan for Bangalore-Mumbai Economical Corridor. So it's clearly, you can see in the slide, the idea is to promote economic growth in this development, basically contribution towards enhancing the contribution towards GDP, enhancing employment in this region, and of course bringing in investments and enhancing exports, because this project was perceived under Make in India. So this corridor was planned along the 1,000-kilometer stretch of connecting the National Highway 4, connecting Bangalore and Mumbai, covering 2 states. So our role was to do first to delineate the region, the influence region of the Bangalore-Mumbai Economical Corridor, and prepare a perspective plan which will cover infrastructure components, identification of nodes, and how to bring in investments into these kind of region. So that is the overall brief about this project. And of course, government has a clear, DMIDC was the client, and they had a clear objective defined, telling that although it has to be competitive, it has to be to international standards or infrastructure planning. They told no compromise on environment and ecology. It has to be sustainable and then inclusive. So it has to be participatory with the local, regional, and socio-economic components of the regions. So what we did was, when we started with, I would say, 2 value additions as a landscape architect intervention in this particular project. I would say in delineation, the component 1, you can see small maps showing the buffers created around National Highway 4. There are, apart from National Highway 4, there are 2 more lines, the rail link connecting Bangalore and Mumbai, and also the gas pipeline which runs Dighi to Bangalore. These 3 are the main economic infrastructure corridors which are perceived in this region, around which we have to develop the region. So if you take, generally in any corridor region, the corridor region is defined with a buffer of 50 or 100-kilometer influence on either side of the corridor. So when we do that, the corridor region in Karnataka as well as in Bangalore, it goes into Western Ghats and even touching the coastal area. So that is how we can see this particular image. where you can see this one. It is almost touching the coastal area, completely encroaching into the Western Ghats area. So what we did is, this is not right. So we cannot go with what has been standardly adopted in other corridor regions. We have to avoid the Western Ghat region. So we excluded the ecologically sensitive area villages, which was fortunately at that time the report was completed. Dr. Kasturirangan report based on Professor Madhav Gatil's report. So that was that we prepared that map and then overlaid, and then we created a buffer to that one. You can see here, it's a small map, but still you can see a dark patch and then a light green patch. So the dark patch are the environmentally sensitive buffer zone and environmentally sensitive villages. Around that, we created a buffer, and then we told these parts, both the buffer villages as well as the environmentally sensitive villages, should be excluded. And we told this is how the corridor region should be. It should not go towards west. The influence should, even if it is 152 kilometers, 200 kilometers away from towards east, that is also fine, but it should not go into the Western Ghats. So this was not, there were a lot of deliberations, and initially it was not accepted. Then we have to convince both the state government as well as DMADC, and then we told, no, we cannot, when we are defining, once the corridor region is defined, then it's very difficult. It will get into a lot of investment, economic infrastructure growth and things like that, which is definitely going to impact the Western Ghats. So we have to exclude this one. So finally it was accepted, and then this is how the corridor region was defined. Instead of 100 or 50 kilometers on either side, it was more towards the eastern side. So this is one thing which we contributed in defining the BMEC region. So it is covering around 1.42 lakh square kilometers, and it covers a population of 7.9 crores, covering 26 districts. So this is the corridor region. So the next comes within the corridor region, we have to plan the infrastructure, the main infrastructure being identifying industrial nodes. So there's a complete assessment of various layers done, and then it is basically a location suitability analysis, what we carried out under GIS-based mapping and analysis. We identified nodes. So here again, primary weightage was given to, of course, infrastructure, socioeconomic components, demographic, all these layers comes as primary, but we gave larger weightage to environmental components, the surface water, forest, flora, fauna, soil, these components, we gave more weightage. And then finally, the node locations were placed, identified, basically with higher weightage, avoiding environmentally sensitive areas. So we identified almost 10 nodes. You can see the red spots. These are the location of nodes. 4 in Maharashtra, 6 in Karnataka, were close to Pune, Indapur. There's a location in Sangli, Satara, and Sholapur. In Karnataka, it is Belgaum, Dharwad, Chitradurga, Davangere. These are the nodes which were identified. And then, of course, the infrastructure things were planned. So I won't go into details of this particular BMEC infrastructure components, but the thing is, the application of location suitability analysis and defining the region, and then how we gave more weightage to environmental component in planning such a one of the most country's economic corridor region perspective plan. So with that, I will go to the next project, which is the next level, urban planning stage. So first, what we saw, as I told, 1.4 lakh square kilometer area. So the next one, I'm talking about 2 major urban planning projects, which are predominantly located in center of Himalayas. One is Pakyong, Sikkim, which is an airport area close to Gangtok, and the second is capital of Bhutan, Thimphu. Both located in Himalayas, as I told. So these 2 are urban planning projects. The Pakyong one is around 140 square kilometer area, and Thimphu one is around 26 square kilometer area. So urban planning. So here the driver of this particular project is the airport which is getting constructed. Pakyong Airport is the airport which is recently opened for operation in close for Gangtok. And government want to develop this particular area. So they want to promote the organized planned development around the airport area. And of course, they have acquired a lot of land. And they told it should not become ad hoc development. It has to be a planned development. So they hired us in preparing this plan. So I was leading the team. So here also, we approached the planning process through ecological planning process, not with the typical traditional urban planning process. So these are some glimpses of the pristine environment around and the planning area I'm talking about. Basically, if you can see, the airport is already under construction at that time. So it's basically they are developing with cutting the mountain. No, there's no other option. This, I think, this image you can see, this cut is actually the airport runway. On a clear day, you can see snow-capped peaks from this particular planning area. So the vision is, we told, yes, eco-friendly, more economic development, more toward with tourism, tradition, and culture, not with industries. Of course, this region has a lot of pharma industries, so government want to push for having a lot of land for pharma industries also. So we thought, okay, we'll assess and then we'll do the suitability accordingly. So the main thing was how to connect this particular area with Gangtok. So we told instead of having road, of course, road connectivity is there. The best way to connect and then economically friendly way to connect is to have a cable car connecting Gangtok to the airport itself. So basically we were trying to see what are the best eco-friendly mode of connecting the places within the planning area as well as with Gangtok. And protecting this is full of forest area. More than 50% of the planning area is having forest cover. Some are even private lands which are under forest cover. So we were trying to see what are the areas which you have to protect. So balance with nature and creating a unique destination for the Sikkim, because this is going to be a major airport centric development. So they were thinking of something like Genting Highland in Malaysia, something like that. We told we'll try and do the best promoting tourism as well as industry-based economic growth with sustainable development. So basically we carried out again the land use suitability assessment for this particular area based on GIS analysis. So you can see the series of maps. Just highlighting, I'll run through the environmental layers: forest typologies, forest density, surface water hydrology, hydrological network, subsurface water regime. So all these mapping were done. I was showing only the environmental parameters. Of course, we were making various layers under demography, economy, environment, infrastructure, transportation. So all these layers were formed and analyzed. And what you see is the higher, the darker the shade is more suitable, lighter the shade is the areas which are less suitable for urban development. So under each layer, each parameter, that is demography, economy, such mapping was done, superimposed and overlaid, and then finally we arrived at what is the best suitable areas for urban development. So you can see what are the green and light green patches are the most suitable areas. The orange, light orange areas are the areas which has to be conserved, protected. So almost 52.6% of the entire area was under conservation. So the point I would like to say is, we didn't go with population projection and tell that, okay, this is the current population projection for next 20 years is this is the population we are going to have, and then we have to plan to accommodate that population. No, we didn't do that. What we did is we told what is the area which can, the carrying capacity of the area by assessing this one. So we told, okay, only 43% can be used for development. In that 43 also we have various category which can go for high intense development, which can be having low intense development. So those kind of categorization was done, and then finally we did, okay, this is the population which this can fit in. So that is what we did in Pakyong as well as in Thimphu. Of course, this process started with Thimphu, which is Thimphu was done in 2000 2001. This Pakyong was around 2013. So another thing which I want to highlight is, as I told, the weightage. When you do the GIS analysis, this is a general process, all planning process go through this one. But it all depends on what is the weightage you are giving for the environmental parameters. So we see here, we gave the most highest weightage, 35% for the environmental parameters. If the weightage varies, say for example, if I am giving transport the higher weightage, then the scenario is completely going to be different. And then that is where it is going to impact the environment. And that is what happening in most of the plans which are getting prepared. Okay, so this is the final zoning plan for Pakyang area. So as I told, almost 52% is under conservation, out of which 43 were strictly told as a conservation zone. Rest all like more of passive kind of some kind of activity. We didn't tell no development. Some kind of passive kind of development also we accommodated. Thimphu City Corporation, I have presented in Thimphu Master Plan. I have presented in various forums. So I won't go into details. Glimpses of Thimphu, beautiful city. Exactly the methodology what followed for Pakyang, same kind of ecological planning process was done. So it's slightly smaller than Pakyang. Pakyang was 140 square kilometer. This is around 22 square kilometer. This was a valley. Pakyang was a mountain. The same process was followed, and as I told, around 44% of the entire planning area was under environmental conservation. Only 21% was open for urban development. So we call it as urban villages. This was done under Christopher, the planning process. Then subsequently, I was there for 5 years implementing this plan also. And we had a system of open spaces. So basically, when we are telling environmental conservation or green space conservation, we didn't tell, as I told, no development. We told what can be the best use given. So for example, river protection zones, it was created as a passive recreational area with pedestrian paths, with pedestrian bridges connecting across. So nothing was like concealed and quarantined like a area of no development. There were uses assigned to these things. So there was a system of open space and pedestrian network for the entire city plan. Subsequently, when the master plan is done, the next stage comes, okay, as I told, regional plan, then the urban plan, then comes the local area plan and urban design. So that is like the tool of transferring what we planned in the regional scale and urban scale into the ground. So in Thimphu, we get that opportunity to do the local area plan as well as urban design. So this is one such local area, what you see in the screen. This is called Hejo Samtoling local area plan, say around 1.5 square kilometer of area. The tool here was land pooling. So whatever green buffer we are talking about for streams and rivers, it is how to get this land, because these are all private land. We have to give these buffers. You don't have these are not every land parcel is under somebody's ownership. So how to do it? It is, we told anyhow we are going to create a land pool for road and other infrastructure development. Why not for environmental conservation also? Which initially people didn't agree, but later over a period of time with a lot of interaction and promoting the plan across various forums. Finally, people agreed for that one to contribute their share of land, provided they told you should not exceed 30% the total land pooling share. So they agreed for it, and then finally the plans are, most of these around 10 local area plans we did, most of them are already under implementation. Some are completed, some are ongoing. So this is Google image which was taken probably 5 years back. Now it is much more developed. So it is exactly what we planned. It's getting implemented. In fact, some of these green buffers, as I told, the green edge of the green buffer, 30 meter or 15 meter, we have this footpath defining the edge. So these were all completed when I was there, even before when I left Thimphu in 2006. And both sides you have footpaths and connected with these kind of traditional footbridges, what you see here. And within the city, it becomes a riverfront development, which is also it's partly completed now. And some areas where the river terraces, we want to protect it as green areas. We propose them as play fields, one as a cricket play field, one as a FIFA playground. So those things also got implemented. And these are some urban design proposal. So this is a national memorial. Chotan is a national monument. What is current situation? It's more like a traffic island. It was not getting the scale, and it was not recognized as a. You don't get the feel of national monument there. So we told we'll divert the road and then create more space in front of it. So this is what it was done, and then created a more space on the foreground for this particular area. So these are the urban design. So I'm just talking about quickly running you through from how we go from regional to urban scale to urban design. So that is how it is, that the continuity, how it is getting transferred from regional scale to even a smaller component of design like this. So I'm just running through this one. And then apart from that, the next one I would like to show is a master plan. Here, this is about master plan for a religious precinct. This is a partly heritage conservation as well as a tourism destination project. It is in Jharkhand, place called Itkuri, close to Bodh Gaya. This place is of Buddhist significance. Of course, it is significant to Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism. So the objective is to emphasize all these three religions, but give more significance to Buddhism, because this is a place where Buddha meditated and then went to Bodh Gaya. Before going to Bodh Gaya, he meditated here. So the place where he meditated, it is somewhere at this point where there is a stupa. Right now, only that stupa with a small mandapa there, it is there. And then these two temples, which is a Bhadragali temple, it is there. Rest of the area, you don't have any major development. There's a small ghat which is being developed along the river here. So what we told is we'll define the historicity of the place and enhance the religious as well as historical significance. We told we'll have a axis defining the Hindu temple, axis defining the Buddhist temple, as well as the Jain temple, which is getting constructed here. We'll define these axes, and then we'll have a common grand entrance plaza. From there, either if you want to go to Hindu temple, you can take this axis. If it is Buddhist temple, you can go. But all these things are interlinked. So from one place to other, you can always move along. And defining the this central axis, which goes to the existing stupa, and then it gets culminated in a monument. So government of Jharkhand wanted to have some kind of monument. So we had a world largest prayer wheel proposed, because a lot of options were explored. Say from Buddhist statue, tallest Buddhist statue, stupa, various options were explored. Statues and stupas are very common. The Chief Minister agreed and selected our proposal to have a prayer wheel, which is of course a Tibetan origin, Tibetan Buddhism element, but he told yes, we can have it here. So that is one thing which is part of the master plan. So the master plan is approved, and construction, initial phases of construction for the entrance plaza and other components are already initiated in this particular project. This is a view of a proposed grand prayer wheel, which is supposed to be the world largest prayer wheel. Another project which I would like to highlight, this is in the master planning scale. So the sorry to tell, Itkuri is around 160 acres. So this is a IT park. This is a 22 acres done in Bangalore, Electronic City. In 2000, when I was working with ICOS under landscape architect Neena Chandavakar, should thank her to give the opportunity. This is one of the first master plan probably I worked. The point I would like to tell is, of course, the architectural part was done by architect Vasuki. He did the architectural part, but right from the initial stage, right from the master planning stage, our ICOS was involved in preparing the master plan. So we were able to create a complete sustainable master plan come landscape in this particular project. So right from the master planning, you can see there's a system of blue lines. This is nothing but swales. So there is no hardscape drains here. It is completely system of bioswales. connecting and then gets collected. There's a system of rainwater harvesting. So in the entire water from the site, it gets collected into this particular water channel, and then there is a rainwater harvesting pit here. And so this is the main core element around which all the buildings were arranged. And of course, when the water gets slightly wider, and that becomes the backdrop for the amphitheater here. So that is how the master plan was done. So this is done in 2000. In 2014, this proposal, the Velangani Information System Management decided to take this particular project, and then this is one of the first platinum rated master plan under IGBC. So these are some glimpses of these are when it was under construction in 2000, 2001. So as I told, you can see pictures of the swale system here, as well as you can see here. It's all the natural swale system. So even the water runoff from the parking, it's collected and then gets into the swale system. This particular picture is the recent one. Rest all is taken in 2000, 2001. So as I told, it gets IGBC platinum rating. So there's a lot of parallelly, there's a lot of master planning happening at that particular Wipro, Infosys, various campuses in Electron City were happening. But I would say this is one of the most comprehensive, sustainable master plan which was done in terms of rainwater harvesting, in even planting plan. I would say very well integrated master plan in that case. So that's why even after so many years, the recognition has happened very late. Of course, it's only the certification, but the idea of low impact development, all these things, of course, those time these terminologies were not there in 2000, but these are the ideas which got implemented, and then right now they don't have issue of water, and they have their own sufficient water supply, and they have a very good ecosystem there. They are quite happy. The management is very happy about what is happening there. So this was that I would say this was established with the involvement of landscape architect right from the master planning stage. So I would like to the idea of the entire presentation is what I run through you from regional to urban planning to master planning, urban design to master planning. We have a role, and then with respect to spatial planning, I would say landscape architects have the we are equipped to handle this component very well, and we have to get into these kind of large scale projects. Say, for example, you can see here age friendly community planning, which is also happening parallelly in India. Child friendly city, I think Bhubaneswar is one of the under smart city program. Bhubaneswar is identified as child friendly city. So most of the, if you see the scope of that particular project, it's all landscape oriented. City resilient, again, UN's initiative to make the city resilient. Most of the components, it's all linked to landscape architect. There is a lot of involvement of landscape architect in this particular scheme also. Blue green, Bhopal is one of the smart city which was done under the scheme of blue green cities. And then UNESCO's Man and Biosphere scheme, which basically talking about defining the biosphere reserves in India with the core area and the buffer area. So basically we have to identify the core area and demarcate it from the buffer area, and we have to define the activities in this one. So these are some large activities which are happening, but I don't know how far landscape architects are getting involved, because these things, I would say, we have a large role to play in these components, including smart city and whatever I was showing in regional and urban planning components. Fortunately, Bobby was telling me that day, child-friendly city is currently headed by one of the landscape architects. So that's I'm happy to know that kind of things are happening. So this is what I would like to say. Landscape architect have a significant role in to play spatial planning in design, regional and urban planning. The images what you see is the beautiful cities of Kalimpong, Shimla, right? Gangtok. So this is how it's all happening, because there is lack of awareness on ecological planning, and very rare involvement of, I would say, ecological planner or a landscape architect in the planning process. I would say that definitely with these kind of involvement, we can avoid these kind of situations getting created, concrete jungles getting created. So as Ian McCaig has told, development, we cannot tell no development, but we can mitigate the impact by proper conservation plan. And that, I think, with the involvement of landscape architect, it can be definitely done. I would like to put across in this forum, probably we can have a discussion on that. As I told, why this is happening, we are not getting involved, landscape architects are not getting involved, because there is the awareness of ecological planning process. I don't see much of the government department, because most of the planning processes are taken under government departments. So when they define the scope and things like that, the ecological planning process doesn't get defined very clearly. So that is one thing. And general perception, landscape architect, the general perception, overall perception is we are more to do with landscape design. We are not seen as a planners at all. So that is one thing I think we have to start promoting ourselves as we are also planners, because landscape it's not only the design part, landscape is also the land use, which is, I feel we have a larger role to play in defining the land use. So that is one thing I think we have to start promoting ourselves in that one. Tenders and bids which we come across, mostly landscape architect is defined only for planting plan or some kind of landscape element design. Only then you find a landscape architect in the team required. Otherwise, in most of the planning bids, let it be urban planning, regional planning, even when I am talking about most of the urban design proposal, I came across a lot of riverfront proposal, lakefront enhancement, all such projects where landscape architect was not at all in the team. So then we put it across in the pre-bid meeting. Yes, we should have landscape architect and things like that. We have to debate, right? Then some cases it gets incorporated, but some cases it doesn't. Situation is definitely improving, but I'm talking about the general scenario. Okay, so what can be done? So basically, landscape institutions institutions like ISOLA, we should start pushing ourselves that involvement of landscape architect in such projects. I think we should push ourselves as a firm also to participate in such projects, and we should also interact with the town planning institutes that please recognize landscape also as a planning discipline. The landscape profession should be recognized as a planning discipline. And then, of course, interacting with government officials. Whenever we get opportunity, I'm always doing that. So we are pushing for it. So there is a collective effect required, and we have to push it more to get involved, so that I think we have a larger role to play in nation building, in urban and regional planning. And I think we should recognize ourselves as well as push for it. So my presentation is basically about that. And with our involvement, I think definitely the scenarios can change. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh. Thank you for enlightening us by explaining the broader perspective of landscape in association with other fields. So we saw many good exemplary master planning projects responding to nature and environment assets. We all learned a lot through your presentation. That an urban development and master planning can be, in fact, should be done with larger credits to environment, ecology, and other associated fields of landscape, other associated layers of landscape resource. So thank you again. So, sir, you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope you are ready with question and answer session.
Yeah.
So let's see if we have any questions. So yeah, so like you explained us that giving weightage to the natural layers which affect the decision of master planning. So there are two combined questions. One is particularly about Sikkim asked by Rutumani RH and on broader way by Mr. Sandeep Patil. That can you elaborate more on how the weightages are decided for each layers and how you proceed in that case? How the percentages are fixed, and can you elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah, it is. There is no set rule on defining the percentage. We had a tough time in. It is like a combined forum of course, the department and various stakeholders involved in that. The one way of looking at it is create slope analysis, yes, we are all aware of it, but there is some.
I think Mr. Venkatesh, we have lost you. Uh, okay, I think there is some network problem. I think he will join us in a while. Okay. Can somebody call him?
He is there.
Yeah.
Able to hear me now? I got disconnected.
Yeah, we lost you completely. I think so.
Yeah.
You need to.
Yeah. So I was talking about slope aspects. So basically, once you add such kind of layers, multiple layers, I was talking about apple orchard, which needs certain kind of phasing. But once you overlay the slope aspect and some other layers, then you find out that this particular mountain is casting shadow on that one. Of course, this is not suitable for this particular land use. Same with residential use and things like that. So I'm telling what I'm trying to tell is try to create as many layers, and then definitely automatically the environmental layers gain weightage once we go in deep into these things. So if you are limiting only with, say, I will do flora, fauna, hydrology, slope, then it's only 4 layers. But when you go into subsurface soil, geology, geology itself will have 4-5 layers. And then in forest, you go into various categories of forest, like in terms of vegetation types, forest types. So then, and try to emphasize the significance of each and every layer. Then automatically, the more layers, more weightage it gets. We get more weightage. So that kind of, I would say, one way of increasing weightage for environment is try to build more layers. For that, of course, you need a lot of studies to be done. Fortunately, being here, the Sikkim Himalayan region, a lot of layers, such studies were done. Only thing is we have to go and interact with the right department, bring them all together. So we brought in, other side you have infrastructure and all other departments. So we also bring in equally the forest department, geology department. So all those departments get involved. So the stakeholder building as well as the layer building is very important in getting this weightage, higher weightage for environmental things. Same thing we did it in Bhutan also, as well as in BMEC. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So there is another question from. Sorry again, I think there's some network problem. We cannot hear your audio.
Hello, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. So there is another question. Being a landscape architect, we want to know your experience, how you feel when a landscape architect leads a master planning team.
Yeah, very interesting question. Yes, definitely, it is a challenge. Initially, it was definitely a challenge because no urban, I would say, with due respect to all urban planners and urban designers, but thing is, urban planners, urban designers, they don't accept you as a team leader. They don't generally accept landscape architect as a team leader, which is quite obvious that it is very common scenario. Nothing, nobody to blame that scenario. But once we get them involved and then try to, it is as I told, it's a challenging process. So I would say my experience in Christopher Benninger of planning and implementing city structure plan, I would thank Christopher at this point. So it was Christopher who recognized me. He hired me not as a landscape architect. He hired me as a landscape planner, and he gave the complete freedom of evolving, defining the land use, that is the pre-seen plan based on GIS analysis. And then he told, yes, we have to do as whatever exactly the methodology defined by Ian McCall. So that is where it all started. And the most important about Thimpu structure plan is it is not only just a plan, we proved implementing on ground. So that is where the success lies. So if you take any plan, it's very rare to go for implementation. Thimpu went for implementation. With that experience, I was able to convince, yes, this is what it has to be done. So credentials, definitely I was able to convince my team. Definitely, as I told, initially it was challenge, but over a period of time, it's all okay. Yeah, it's accepted. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So in your, I think in the Bhutan project, we saw your like your involvement with the locals. So like in other projects also, Shaili Jain is asking that how often do you communicate with the locals while going ahead in the projects, and how much time and research does a project take, and so were you involved?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question because see these projects, as I told, 5 years I spent in Bhutan only for Thimpu structure plan and its implementation. So it's one project under various components: planning, urban design, local area plan. So 3 components, and of course the time spent was it was definitely it's a great thing, as I told, because it went for implementation. End of the day, if something is implemented, then that is the best thing. Otherwise, most of the planning process remains as a report. So coming back to answering your question, so that kind of time is required for inclusive or participatory development. So as I told, first 2 years went in planning. During planning stage also, we were interacting with the public. Bhutan, definitely it was challenging. There was court case filed against the plan because nobody wants to share their land in terms of land pooling. The court case itself was headed by a ex-minister, ex-foreign minister. So he was getting it. So it was a very tough thing. But over a period of time, imagine we using social media 20 years back. So there was something called Pinsel Online at that time. So we were using that in bringing people together, supporting our land pooling scheme. So, of course, as I told, a lot of time is required in stakeholder interaction and public interaction. And same thing and Pakyang, the project period was only very brief, 9 months. So whatever we were able to do in that 9 months time, we did that. BMEC, the set of stakeholders are completely different, but still we managed to do that one. It's initially it was 1 year project. Of course, it went for 2.5 years. So stakeholder consultation is very, very crucial, and it is time consuming, and it can completely overturn your planning process, and you have to redo the planning, whatever you're doing. So it's a challenge, but very much necessary, because without that, your plan won't go into implementation.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Ravi Kumar Narayan is asking, so if any time like we have to deal with these scale of projects focusing on ecology and environment, what are the other essential collaborations, competencies which we have to be the part, we have to collaborate to be the part of the organization? What all collaborations are required to deal with ecology and environment?
No, definitely, see, for landscape architect, correct. So see, what I'm trying to tell is, as a landscape architect, we know the sensitivity of environmental issues, and we know the methodology, how to approach it, right? And then we also know who are the experts to bring in. So I think that is where we have to play a team leader or at that position in such projects. So exactly as Ravi is asking, what are the associations and co-experts we have to bring in? I think we know the best which are the experts to bring in. So geologists, let it be geologists or specialists in flora, fauna, and any other specialized landscape architect himself. Say, for example, one of our project, we associated with Mohan, landscape architect from Bangalore. So he is doing one of our project in not only one project, more than one project. So because of his specialization in certain field, so we bring in. So we associate. It is not that just it is landscape architect, but I'm telling we associate with other co-landscape architects as well as other experts. So definitely such association is definitely required. Without that, any project it won't. It has inputs from various forums, various experts, and there will be project-specific experts required. Yes, definitely that kind of association is required.
Yeah, I think this scale cannot be achieved without these associations. So,
exactly.
Mr. Sandeep Patil again have an interesting question. Urban planners, they are generally more towards the demographic and economic parameters, and we as landscape architects are more towards the ecological players. So how do you mediate this challenge when they come together?
Not exactly. Urban planners also, it's not that they don't look into ecology and environment. Definitely they look into environment ecology also. This thing. What I am trying to tell is, we have the intricacies, we know the intricacies, and we know, as I told, the right methodology. Slightly, we have a better edge than urban planners, because they, of course, with respect to socio-economic, economic components, demographic components, infrastructure components, they have a slightly better edge. We have slightly, it is like we have to come together. So I'm not telling we have to take lead, or of course in certain projects, say for example in the Himalayan region, I think we have to take a lead, but in a different situation they have to take a lead. But what I'm trying to tell is the involvement. How many regional planning and urban planning project ask for a landscape architect to be involved in the planning process? According to me, zero. I haven't come across any planning bid or a planning process which asks, okay, in the list of key experts, you will find urban planner, you will find economist, you will find social specialist, infrastructure specialist, but not you'll find an environmental specialist, but not landscape architect. Okay, So that is what I am trying to say. We have I feel that we have definitely a better background and better edge in dealing with the environmental components of any regional or urban component. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so we will
So I'm
go
not
ahead.
competing with the urban planners, but I'm telling you
Yeah,
should get involved.
yeah. Good, healthy collaboration is required, guys. So, in addition
Exactly. Yeah.
to Shally Jain's question, I would like to add upon her question that I think, can you share some interesting experiences dealing with the government and government officials while handling these large scale projects? I think that would be a nice ending to the question and answer session.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of it.
I mean to say that can you share some interesting experience which you had with government and government officials while handling these large scale projects? Any interesting experience?
Yeah, I would say yes. Definitely, with respect to Bangalore Mumbai Economical Corridor, the client was, as I told, DMIDC, headed by one of the most intelligent and highly esteemed IAS officer, Mr. Amitabh Kant, was heading DMIDC at that time. Every meeting we get bashed, not only us, generally all consultants, we get bashed because he expects very precise data and precision in every component presented. Initially, as I told, he told why we need this kind of ecological planning process. For it's very clear, it's economic corridor. We have to. The focus is because of the timelines and things like that. But for a period of time, when we explained myself and my at that time, Champaka was leading the planning team in Aegis. So we together, we convinced the DMIDC, and then the success of that thing reflected in the next tender which they released. They mentioned land suitability, location suitability analysis. These things became part of the scope when the next tender came out for the next corridor project. So that is one interesting experience I would like to share. And of course, Bhutan experience is the most challenging and interesting experience. As I told, the court case. So it was like the Land Act says you cannot. You can take the land for government development, but you have to acquire it because land pooling was not part of the act. So land pooling was something which we newly introduced there. So it was not a part of the act. So the act was getting formed. So when a court case was fined, it will go with the existing act. The existing act tells land has to be acquired. So people, the ex-foreign minister who led this forum, he told, yeah, you can take, we are okay, we can take 25% or 30% of our land, but pay for that. So that is what his case was about. So then we have to convince him, telling that if that is the case, if we have to acquire land, government has money to acquire the land, then can acquire the entire local area plan instead of buying only 30%. Then it can have better plan in place rather than having it only the pooling percentage come. And then once the plan is done, government can sell that land in a better high value because it's all in urbanized plots. So definitely there will be a value added to that. So government can get the revenue back in that case. So that is the option government has. So if government has to do land acquisition, then it can be the complete local area, not in terms of pooling percentage. So these kind of debates went on for quite a long time, and then we went and convinced each, and there was totally 18 land local area heads which they went and filed the case against, and then we tried to go and convince each and every one, and then finally everybody came to our side, and then only the Honorable Limpo ex-minister, only he was fighting the case. Most of them came in support of us, and then finally, of course, the verdict was in favor of us, and the projects are getting implemented. So what I'm trying to say is these kind of projects, definitely it goes through a lot of turbulence, lot of challenge. But end of the day, if we stick to our agenda and we feel this is what it is right, and then of course people will come supporting you. Definitely for environment, initially we have to face a lot of issues and turbulence, but definitely people are with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. So I think we will end question and answer session here. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and wonderful answers to all our visitors and spectators. So in the next session, we would be having Shruti Humane. The session would be on 27 June. It's the session 11, and the topic would be 3 constants. So we would be elaborating a bit about the topic in our poster and in our note. So see you all again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you for Gujarat and Rajasthan chapter for organizing this. And thank you very much.